England, 1816. The year without a summer. After decades of war against Napoleon Bonaparte, Europe was finally breathing, but peace had brought with it not just relief, it had also brought the inevitable reckoning. For the noblemen returning from the battlefields, the scars were not merely physical, they were financial, social, and moral. And for some, they were impossible to heal. This is the story of Lord Nathaniel Ashbourne, Viscount of Winmere, a man who fought for his country only to discover that the true battle awaited him at home. A battle not against cannons or bayonets, but against something far more implacable, English high society, and against his own heart. March, 1816. Lord Nathaniel Ashbourne returns to Winmere after 5 years serving in the Napoleonic Wars. He left as a young man of 22, full of ideals. He returns as a man of 27, marked by battles he prefers to forget. The carriage shakes violently on the muddy road, and through the window, fogged by the incessant rain of that abnormal year, he sees for the first time in years the gray silhouette of his ancestral estate. The estate he left, though already in difficulty, is now in complete ruin. Broken windows leave dark holes in the stone facade. Once elegant gardens have been overtaken by weeds growing rampant across the cracked gravel paths. The stables are empty, the doors hanging from rusted hinges. An iron gate groans painfully as the coachman pushes it open to clear the way. His father, the former Viscount of Winmere, spent every pound the family possessed at the whist and vingt-et-un tables, accumulating debts of honor that no gentleman could ignore. He died 6 months before Nathaniel's return from a heart attack while playing his last hand of cards, leaving only shame and impatient creditors knocking at the door of a mansion that was no longer worth enough to pay what was owed. Nathaniel steps down from the carriage, his boots touching the wet earth. The cold March air bites at his skin through his already worn military uniform, but he barely feels it. He walks slowly through the empty corridors of his childhood, his footsteps echoing in rooms stripped of furniture. Every empty space is a ghost. Every piece of sold furniture represents a lost memory, a piece of family history taken to strangers' homes in humiliating auctions. In the main saloon, only one portrait remains hanging on the peeling wall. His mother, Lady Henrietta Ashbourne, painted 20 years ago in better times, wearing a blue silk dress that was sold long ago. Her eyes seemed to judge him even through the paint and the years, as if she knew of all the battles he had lost and all those yet to come. The drawing-room door opens abruptly. Lady Henrietta Ashbourne enters with decisive steps, dressed in the severe black that mourning demands, the crepe of her skirt brushing the worn wooden floor. The mourning for her husband's death is still marked in every detail of her appearance, though everyone knows that true tears were scarce. But there is no sadness on her face, only cold determination. Lady Henrietta is not a woman for lamentations. A widow for 6 months, she had already calculated every move necessary to save what remained of the Ashbourne name. And now, with her son finally home, she presents her solution: a marriage. She wastes no time on unnecessary sentiment. She sits in one of the 3 remaining chairs, a Chippendale piece that escaped the auction because it was broken, and pours tea from a Georgian silver pot that had miraculously remained hidden from the creditors. Her voice is firm, aristocratic, leaving no room for objections when she says that Nathaniel returns at an opportune moment. Although Winmere is in a delicate situation, his lineage still carries weight. The Ashbournes trace back to the reign of Charles II. There are families willing to invest in an ancient viscountcy, families with fortunes made in the Indies trade, but without the antiquity of blood that the Ashbournes possess. Nathaniel sits heavily in another unstable chair, the fatigue of 5 years of war finally catching up to him. His voice comes out deep and tired as he replies that his mother speaks of him as if he were a property for sale at Tattersall's. Lady Henrietta does not flinch, shows no offense. She places her teacup on the cracked saucer with calculated firmness and replies that yes, he is a property for sale, just as they all are in this world. The difference lies in negotiating with dignity or desperation. She prefers the first option, always has. During Nathaniel's 6-month absence, While he was still in France assisting with the occupation, Lady Henrietta carefully cultivated relations with the Marquis of Lynden, one of the most influential men in England, whose fortune comes from extensive properties in the north and lucrative investments in railways. The Marquess has 2 daughters. The younger, Miss Arabella Lynden, is 18, was just presented to society last season, and comes with a dowry of £5,000 a year. A marriage between Nathaniel and Arabella would not only save Winmere, but would restore the Ashbourne reputation and open doors that war and gambling debts had violently slammed shut. Nathaniel asks what happens if he refuses this negotiation of his life. The silence that follows is heavy, laden with unsaid threats and cruel realities. Lady Henrietta replies with calculated coldness that then Winmere will be auctioned off by next spring. The 3 remaining servants will be dismissed without references, and she, his dear mother, will be forced to live on the charity of distant relatives in Yorkshire, a widowed cousin who has already made it clear that hospitality has its limits. She leans forward slightly, her eyes fixed on his with an intensity he recognizes from his childhood days, and asks if he did not fight 5 years for England, survive Waterloo where so many died. Surely he can dedicate 1 year to saving his own family, his own name, his own history. Nathaniel knows that silence. It is the same one that precedes an order to attack on the battlefield. There is no negotiation here, only obedience or desertion. And he has already deserted once, when he left for the war leaving something precious behind, someone he loved but could not have. He will not desert again. His voice comes out resigned as he asks when he is to meet Miss Lynden. Lady Henrietta smiles for the first time since he arrived, a victor's smile that does not reach her eyes. At Lady Pemberton's ball, she replies with satisfaction. In 3 days' time. He must wear his officer's uniform with all his medals. The young ladies adore a war hero, especially one with a title and an estate, even if the estate is in temporary ruin. London, 1816. The social season is in full swing despite the abnormally cold weather that persists even in April. Lady Pemberton's ball is one of the first great events since the end of the war, and the English aristocracy gathers to see and be seen, to evaluate fortunes and negotiate marital alliances under the guise of trivial conversation and elegant dances. The ballroom is lit by hundreds of beeswax candles reflecting in the gilded mirrors imported from France and in the crystals of the Venetian chandeliers. A string quartet plays a Strauss waltz as couples spin gracefully across the polished Italian marble floor. Lord Nathaniel Ashbourne enters the ballroom in the dark blue uniform of a cavalry officer, his polished campaign medals reflecting the candlelight. Heads turn. Whispers circulate among ivory fans and glasses of French champagne. It is the young Ashbourne, the matrons say. I heard he survived Waterloo when his regiment was decimated. Survived, yes, murmur the gentlemen, but his father's fortune did not survive the gaming tables at White's. Still, he is a viscount with an ancient lineage. And they say he is handsome, whisper the young ladies, despite the scars that mark his sun-bronzed face and his hands that held swords and reins for years. Lady Henrietta leads her son directly to the Marquis of Lynden, a man of 60 with gray hair combed with pomade, wearing a burgundy velvet coat and a military posture, despite never having served a day. At his side are his 2 daughters. The first is Miss Arabella Lynden, blonde curls pinned up in an elaborate hairstyle with sky-blue silk ribbons, a white muslin dress with delicate embroidery as required for debutantes, innocent blue eyes that have never seen real suffering. She smiles shyly when introduced, her cheeks flushing slightly under Nathaniel's gaze, her gloved fingers playing nervously with her painted silk fan. Nathaniel bows with the formal courtesy he learned as a child and says it is an honor to meet her, that his mother speaks very highly of her family and their properties in the north. Arabella replies with a soft voice, almost childish in its modulated tone, that the honor is hers, that he is very brave for having served England in such terrible times, that her father says the war was absolutely dreadful and she cannot even imagine it. Nathaniel confirms briefly that it was, indeed, more than words can express. The conversation dies there, in an uncomfortable silence that stretches. Arabella does not know what to ask a soldier who has seen horrors beyond her sheltered understanding. Nathaniel does not know how to talk to a girl who has never known real pain, whose greatest worry thus far has been choosing the right dress for the next ball or deciding between pink and lavender to embroider a handkerchief. It is in this moment of awkward silence that Nathaniel looks to the side, and his world stops completely. The murmur of the ballroom fades. The music becomes distant and muffled. Everything narrows to a single point of focus across the crowd. On the other side of the ballroom, conversing discreetly with an older lady wearing a feathered turban, is Lady Clara Lynden. Not Miss Clara, but Lady Clara, the courtesy title she bears by birth as a marquis's daughter. Arabella's older sister. The woman Nathaniel secretly loved 6 years ago. The woman he left behind when he went to war without saying goodbye, without explanations, without promises he could not keep. 6 years ago, Clara Lynden was 20 and Nathaniel 21. They had met at a similar ball when he was still just a second son with no real prospects, destined to join the clergy or the army as fortune decided. She was the eldest daughter of a powerful marquess, destined for a brilliant marriage to someone of her own high class, perhaps a duke or at least an earl. For an entire summer that now seems to have taken place in another life, they exchanged glances across crowded rooms, dances that lasted too long to be proper according to the watchful eyes of the chaperones, and finally, stolen words on dark terraces scented with jasmine and in secret gardens where wild roses grew. Walks at dawn in Kensington Gardens when the house was still asleep and mist covered the lake. Conversations about books that society deemed improper for young ladies, Byron and Shelley with their radical ideas. Genuine laughter in a world of carefully constructed falsehoods and social masks. Nathaniel had never met anyone so alive, so intelligent, so genuinely real. Clara did not pretend to be less than she was to please men or fit expectations. She debated philosophy, questioned the social order, thought for herself. She saw him not as a title or a position in the hierarchy, but as he truly was beneath it all. But he had nothing to offer a marquis's daughter. No title of his own beyond the courtesy of honorable. No fortune beyond a modest allowance. And Clara was destined for something much greater than a poor second son with an uncertain future. When the war came, bringing the opportunity of a purchased commission in the army, Nathaniel left without saying goodbye. It was easier that way, he told himself on the cold nights in the Iberian Peninsula. A clean, quick break. Better than a prolonged, painful farewell that would change nothing of the cruel reality. He went to war, thinking he would eventually forget her. That time and distance and perhaps other women would erase what he felt for her that impossible summer. But it did not. For 5 years of bloody battles, of the screams of dying men and the smell of gunpowder and blood, when all seemed lost and death was a real possibility with every misty dawn, it was her face he saw in the hours before the attack. It was her laugh he heard in the moments of silence between artillery bombardments. It was the memory of her hand in his during those forbidden dances that kept him sane when so many around him lost their minds under the weight of the horror. Now, 6 years later, Clara is here again in the same type of ballroom where they met. But everything has changed. She no longer wears the virginal white of a debutante with its implications of innocence and availability. Her dress is a moss green in matte silk, elegant but discreet, without the elaborate adornments of pearls and ribbons that unmarried young women wear to attract wealthy suitors. Her brown hair with its copper highlights is pinned in a simple matronly style, without the ostrich feathers and excessive jewels that other women display like trophies. A black velvet ribbon is tied around her wrist, a discreet sign of mourning not completely ended. And there is something in her eyes, a deep sadness, a melancholic resignation that was not there 6 years ago, when they were young and naive, and the world seemed full of infinite possibilities. Lady Henrietta notices her son's fixed gaze and murmurs low, with no apparent emotion in her trained voice, that is Lady Clara, Arabella's older sister, widow of Sir Edmund Thornhill, a baronet. She married 4 years ago in a modest ceremony. Sir Edmund died last year of a sudden fever contracted in London. No heirs, not even a daughter. She pauses calculatedly and then adds, in the tone of someone dismissing something of no commercial value, that Nathaniel must forget her completely. A childless widow has little value on the marriage market, no dowry to offer a second time, no utility. He must concentrate on Arabella, the real opportunity. But Nathaniel cannot concentrate on Arabella with her childish conversation and her overly innocent eyes. His eyes betray him, seeking Clara repeatedly across the crowded room of dancing and talking bodies. And then, as if feeling the weight of that gaze burning on her skin across the distance, Clara turns. Her eyes meet his across dozens of people dancing and conversing between them, an electric connection that spans the space. For a moment, just one moment suspended in time like amber trapping an insect, the ballroom disappears. The people fade into insignificant mist. The music stops. 6 years fold in on themselves and vanish like smoke. It is just him and her again. As they were that impossible summer so long ago, it seems like another life. And then Clara looks away first, her face turning pale as paper beneath her rice powder. She turns abruptly and disappears into the colorful crowd of dresses and coats, leaving Nathaniel standing there with his heart pounding erratically against his ribs, and the terrible certainty that he made a mistake 6 years ago that he might not be able to correct. Arabella touches his arm gently with gloved fingers, bringing him back to reality, asking if he is all right, if she said something he did not hear. Nathaniel forces himself to smile, a practiced smile of social courtesy, to return to the present and the reality of his inevitable duty. He hears himself asking her for the next dance, sees her face light up with genuine, artless joy, feels her light hand rest on his arm as he leads her to the center of the floor among other forming couples. They dance the country dance that the orchestra plays. Arabella is light in his arms, weighs nothing, chats about trivialities that slide over him without leaving a mark or impression. The dreadful weather this year, the excessively gilded decoration of Lady Pemberton's ballroom, her mother's new French modiste, who makes absolutely divine dresses with the latest fashions from Paris. He responds on autopilot, his mind elsewhere entirely, on a woman in a green dress disappearing into the crowd. When the dance ends with their final bow and he escorts her back to her father, he murmurs a polite excuse about urgently needing fresh air and escapes to the terrace before anyone can stop him or make more introductions. The cold April air bites his skin as he steps out through the French glass door, but it is welcome after the suffocating heat of the ballroom, overcrowded with bodies and lit candles. He takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with clean air that smells of imminent rain, trying to organize the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind like leaves in a gale. The voice comes from behind him, calm but tense as a taut violin string, asking if he is really going to do it then. Nathaniel turns abruptly. Clara is there, a few steps away by the stone balustrade. In the dimness of the terrace, lit only by the Chinese paper lanterns swaying in the cold breeze, she looks like a ghost from his past, materialized. Beautiful but untouchable. Real but too distant to reach across the social abyss. He says her name like a prayer, like a plea for forgiveness he does not deserve. Clara. Clara cuts him off with a controlled voice that tremsivers only slightly at the edges, reminding him that he must call her Lady Clara if he does not mind basic propriety. They are strangers now, Lord Ashbourne. Formalities exist for a very specific reason. Nathaniel takes a step forward and insists that they were never strangers, could never be. Clara laughs, but it is a bitter sound, humorless, sharp as broken glass. Then, what does he call a man who disappears for 6 years without a word, without a letter, without an explanation? A friend. The silence that falls between them is heavy with unsaid accusations and accumulated grievances. Nathaniel takes another step towards her and tries to explain that he left because he had no real choice. The war, the commission, the necessity. Clara interrupts him with a voice harder than he has ever heard from her. A hardness forged in suffering. The war was a convenient excuse. He left because it was easier than facing what was between them. easier than fighting for something that seemed impossible. Nathaniel feels anger rise in his chest, not at her, but at the impossible situation they were in then and are in now. He asks what there was between them worth fighting for. He was nothing. Absolutely nothing. A second son with no future and no fortune. She was a marquis's daughter with dozens of suitable suitors. Her father would never have allowed such an unequal match. Clara interrupts him again, her voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. He did not even try to find out. Did not even ask. He simply left like a coward in the night. She takes a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling, trying to control the emotions that threaten to overflow after 6 years of being dammed up. Her voice is lower, more vulnerable when she continues. He left, Nathaniel. And she waited like a romantic fool, waited for letters that never came through the post, for news of him that never arrived except for vague rumors about distant battles, until her father lost patience with a 22-year-old daughter still unmarried and married her off to Sir Edmund Thornhill, a 45-year-old baronet who needed a young wife to care for his house. Nathaniel feels the floor disappear from beneath his feet. He repeats the words as if he cannot believe them, as if they are in a foreign language. She married. Clara laughs without any humor, a broken sound. Yes, she replies with cutting bitterness. Surprising, is it not? Women tend to do that when they are abandoned and their fathers grow impatient. The marriage market does not wait for foolish dreams. Nathaniel tries to say he did not know, that if he had known, he would have... Clara cuts him off once more. Of course he did not know. How could he? He never asked, never wrote. He simply moved on with his life of soldiering and glory, while hers crumbled into a loveless marriage. Voices approach the terrace door, loud laughter and drunken conversation. Clara changes instantly, regaining the iron composure that society demands of women of her position. She says quickly that someone is coming. They must not be seen talking like this, especially now that he is courting her younger sister. Nathaniel tries desperately to make her understand, reaching out his hand. Clara, I need to explain everything. Clara interrupts him for the last time, her voice final and sharp as a blade. You do not need to explain anything, Lord Ashburn. The past is dead and buried, just like her husband, just like other things she does not need to name aloud. And just as she appeared, Clara disappears again into the crowd of the ballroom, leaving Nathaniel alone on the terrace with the weight of 6 years of silence crushing his chest like a millstone. On the way back home, the carriage sways over the uneven, wet cobblestones. Lady Henrietta is radiant, her mood better than Nathaniel has seen it in years. She talks animatedly about how well he did despite his initial silence, how the Marquis was impressed with his military bearing and medals, how Arabella is charmed and has already mentioned his name 3 times on the way back. They can announce the engagement by the end of the month if he continues the courtship appropriately. Nathaniel asks if it must be so soon, his voice distant and absent. Lady Henrietta replies that there is no time to waste on hesitations. Other families are also eyeing Miss Arabella Lynden and her generous dowry. They need to act before someone offers something better, perhaps a younger earl or a viscount with an intact estate. She pauses and then continues in a softer, almost maternal voice. She knows it is not a marriage for love, my son, but love is a luxury for poets and romantic fools. He is a viscount with responsibilities. He has duties that cannot be ignored for ephemeral feelings. Nathaniel looks out the carriage window at the London night. The streets are empty except for a few staggering drunkards, lit only by occasional oil lamps that cast long, distorted shadows. He asks what happens if he does not want Arabella. Lady Henrietta laughs lightly, as if he had told a childish, absurd joke. Want? My dear, he does not need to want. He just needs to marry, produce male heirs, and maintain social appearances. The rest is completely irrelevant for a man of his position. Nathaniel continues to look out the fogged window. He thinks of Clara, of the wounded look in her green eyes, of the words she said, "The past is dead," but it is not dead. Not for him. 6 years of war, of blood covering uniforms and the screams of agonizing men. and the only thing that kept him sane were memories of her laugh like bells, of the touch of her hand in his when they danced, of the way she looked at him as if he were someone worth truly knowing. Lady Henrietta calls his name with impatience, asking if he is listening to a word she is saying. Nathaniel turns, forcing focus on her voice. Yes, mother, he is listening to every word. He will court Miss Arabella Lynden as expected, and he will marry her if necessary to save Winmere. Lady Henrietta smiles, satisfied, saying she knew he would see reason eventually, that he is her son after all. But as his mother smiles victoriously in the gloom of the carriage, Nathaniel feels something breaking inside him like cracking ice. He survived 5 years of war, but he is not sure he will survive what is to come. The following weeks unfold with the precision of a military campaign, carefully planned by experienced generals. Lord Nathaniel Ashbourne courts Miss Arabella Lynden with all the rituals that Regency society demands of an honorable gentleman. Morning rides in Hyde Park during the fashionable hour when the weather permits between the constant rains. Formal visits to the Lynden residence in Mayfair at the appropriate afternoons, always with tea served in Wedgwood china and supervised conversations. Attendance at theaters presenting Shakespeare and Sheridan, Italian operas at the King's Theatre, and formal dinners where they are seen together, giving the gossip-hungry society the spectacle it desires and expects. To the eyes of London high society, it is an exemplary courtship worthy of being copied. The war hero Viscount and the innocent young lady from a powerful family. A union that combines ancient title, new fortune, and appropriate appearance in perfect proportions according to the matron's calculations. The betting books in the gentlemen's clubs of St. James favor an engagement announcement before the end of April. The matrons nod with noisy approval during their afternoon teas. The parents of other young ladies sigh with envy for not having thought of it first. But there is a problem Nathaniel did not anticipate in the campaign, a torment he did not foresee in his calculations. Clara is always present. As the older sister and a widow without her own engagements, it is Clara's social duty to accompany Arabella on all public outings until she is officially engaged and under another man's protection. She sits discreetly in every theater box, a few seats behind, wrapped in dark shawls. She walks a few steps behind on every stroll through the park, pretending to admire the trees. She watches in silence at every dinner, every animated conversation, every smile exchanged between her sister and the man she has secretly loved for years. A chaperone as the rules require, a silent witness, a refined torture. Hyde Park on a rare afternoon of sun that manages to penetrate the persistent clouds of 1816 before more rain arrives. Nathaniel leads Arabella along the tree-lined path of Rotten Row, her gloved hand resting lightly on his arm, as the rules of propriety demand, neither too firm nor too loose. A few steps behind, always a few steps behind like a permanent shadow, Clara walks alone, pretending to admire the early flowers trying to bloom despite the abnormal cold that plagues England. Arabella chats animatedly about frivolities, her voice cheerful and carefree as a bird. She asks if Lord Ashburn has ever been to Paris, if he has seen the Eiffel Tower and the grand boulevards. Her father promises to take her when the season ends and summer finally arrives, if it arrives. Nathaniel replies with patience that yes, he was there during the occupation after Waterloo. Arabella sighs dreamily, her cheeks flushing. Oh, how exciting it must have been! Like a fairy tale with all the celebration balls and elegant uniforms. Nathaniel hesitates, choosing his words carefully so as not to destroy her illusions completely. Not exactly like a fairy tale, Miss Lynden. Paris was devastated by the war. Famine in the streets, disease spreading among the populace. There were not many balls, in fact, mostly reconstruction work. Arabella makes a sound of disappointment that sounds almost childlike. Oh, what a pity. She clearly does not understand, cannot visualize the reality of what he saw in the Parisian streets. Behind them, Clara closes her eyes briefly, pain shooting through her chest. She knows what Nathaniel saw in Paris. She knows because she read all the detailed reports in the newspapers, because she paid attention to the debates in Parliament while others discussed only fashion and empty gossip, She read about the famine that devastated the city after years of blockade, about the diseases that spread among the exhausted and desperate population, about the soldiers trying to maintain order in a city that had lost all hope and dignity. She knows because she always paid attention to everything about him, even when she should not have, even when it hurt. Arabella changes the subject cheerfully, like a butterfly flitting from flower to flower, pointing to a bed of lilies blooming bravely despite the cold, unseasonable weather. "Look, Clara! White lilies! Are they not absolutely beautiful?" Clara replies with a controlled, polite voice, practiced in years of dissimulation, that yes, dearest, they are very beautiful indeed. Arabella turns to Nathaniel with childish curiosity. "Lord Ashburn, do you like lilies? They are my favorite flowers for their purity." Nathaniel looks at Clara without meaning to, unable to help it. A reflex stronger than his will. He prefers wild roses, actually. The ones that grow freely without cultivation. The silence that follows lasts only a second, but it feels like an eternity suspended. Wild roses. Clara's favorite since forever. He knows that she knows that he remembers that intimate detail. 6 years ago, he brought her a bouquet of wild roses picked secretly from the Winmere garden at dawn, still with cold dew on the pink petals. She still has one, pressed between the yellowed pages of a volume of Lord Byron's poems that she can never open without feeling physical pain shoot through her chest. Arabella comments that wild roses are peculiar but charming in their simplicity, completely oblivious to the tension vibrating in the air between her sister and her suitor, like a harp-string about to be plucked. The distant bell of St. George's Church marks the end of the appropriate time for the walk, and they turn to return to the waiting carriages. The Theatre Royal, Haymarket, on a night in May. The play is Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, an ironic choice that no one but Clara and Nathaniel seem to appreciate in its deeper meaning. In the luxurious Lynden family box lined with red velvet, Nathaniel is seated beside Arabella, so close their shoulders almost touch as etiquette allows. On the other side of her, separated by meters that feel like impassable kilometers, Clara watches the stage with feigned attention, her fan moving slowly. The actors recite their passionate lines on the stage below, Edmund Kean playing Romeo with dramatic fervor. Arabella whispers to Nathaniel behind her fan that it is very tragic, does he not think? Why did they not just talk honestly with their families about their feelings? Nathaniel whispers back with an irony she does not catch that because sometimes families are the greatest obstacle to happiness. Arabella laughs softly like bells, but it is so exaggeratedly dramatic. In real life, people are more sensible and practical. On the other side, Clara bites her lip until she tastes the metallic tang of blood. Her eyes are not on the stage where Juliet is declaiming about roses and names, no matter how fixedly she pretends to look. They are on the clasped hands of Nathaniel and Arabella on the velvet rest of the box. Hands that should be together according to all the rigid rules of society. Hands that society approves and blesses. Hands that make something inside her shatter into pieces so small, she does not know if she will ever be able to reassemble them into something whole. On the stage, Romeo declares his impossible love with a desperate passion that echoes in the theater. Juliet responds with words that Clara feels burning in her own closed throat. And in the box, 3 people pretend not to feel the suffocating weight of unsaid words, of emotions repressed with visible effort, of fates being sealed against unexpressed wills. During the interval, Arabella and the Marquess leave to greet acquaintances in the main, mirror-lined corridor. Clara stays behind, pleading a slight headache that is not entirely a lie. Nathaniel, ever the gentleman trained since childhood, offers to fetch her a glass of lemonade. But when he returns carrying the crystal glass, he finds the box empty except for Clara, standing by the window that overlooks Haymarket Street, gazing down at the lamps illuminating the wet pavement below where carriages wait. The silence between them is tense as a string about to break. Nathaniel places the glass of lemonade on the side table with excessive care. His voice is low when he says her name. Clara. Clara responds without turning, her shoulders stiffening. Do not. Do not do this. Do what? He asks, taking a step. Clara finally turns, and there is something breaking in her green eyes, shining wetly. Do not say my name like that. As if it still means something, as if it has power. Nathaniel takes another step forward, but it does. It always has. Clara laughs, but the sound is broken, joyless, sharp. It should not. You are going to marry my sister. Frustration finally explodes from Nathaniel. Because I have no choice. Winmere, my mother, the debts. Clara reacts with a voice that also rises in volume. There is always a choice, Nathaniel. You simply prefer the easy ones, the ones that do not require true courage. Nathaniel's anger finally overflows. Easy? You think this is easy? Being by your side day after day, pretending you mean nothing? Pretending I do not think of you every second of every waking hour? Clara whispers for him not to say that, but he is beyond stopping now. Why? Because it is true? Because we both know this farce is unsustainable? Clara takes a step back as if he had raised a hand to her. Because Arabella does not deserve this. She is my sister. She is innocent of all this suffering. And you have hurt her enough without her knowing. Nathaniel reacts with disbelief. Hurt her? She does not even know me truly. Clara nearly shouts, her voice trembling. Exactly. And yet you let her fall in love with a lie, with a version of you that does not exist. Voices approach in the marble corridor, loud laughter and multiple footsteps. Clara changes instantly, smoothing her dress with trembling hands, adjusting her hair, rebuilding the mask of composure that society demands. She says quickly that they are returning. He needs to go now. They cannot be seen this close. Nathaniel tries desperately. Clara, we need to talk properly, without interruptions. Clara shakes her head. There is nothing to talk about. You have made your choice. Now you must live with it. The door opens and Arabella enters cheerfully, speaking animatedly about having met Lady Pemberton, who was wearing the most hideous gown. And just like that, the moment is lost again between social masks and forced smiles that do not reach the eyes of anyone involved. A week later, Nathaniel is invited to a formal dinner at the Lynden residence in Mayfair. It is an important event, a milestone in the courtship. It marks the deepening of marital intentions and the family's official approval at all levels. Lady Henrietta is radiant, wearing her best garnet jewelry that she managed to hide from the creditors. The Marquis is satisfied, his posture relaxed and friendly, an expensive cigar between his fingers. Arabella is delighted, her cheeks flushed with genuine joy and expectation. And Clara is absent. Nathaniel tries to sound casual when he asks if Lady Clara will not be joining them for dinner. The Marquis carves his roast lamb with surgical precision and replies that unfortunately, no. Clara is still observing the appropriate period of mourning for Sir Edmund. She prefers private meals in her chambers as a recent widow should. Lady Henrietta comments with slight, calculated disapproval in her voice that a full year of mourning has passed. It is time for her to return to society completely and consider a second marriage. The Marquis makes a vague sound of agreement as he chews. Clara has always been peculiar, he says, as if discussing the weather or the price of wheat. Since she was a small child. Stubborn, willful, prefers dusty books to balls, solitude to cheerful society. Not like Arabella, who is perfectly sociable. Arabella defends her gently but firmly. Clara is not peculiar, Papa. She is just deeper than most of us, thinks about important things. The Marquis changes the subject abruptly, clearly uninterested in discussing the peculiarities of his elder daughter, who so disappointed him by not producing heirs. Well, Lord Ashbourne, he says, wiping his mouth with the embroidered Irish linen napkin, I believe the time has come to discuss more concrete terms of our agreement. Terms, my lord? Nathaniel asks, though he knows exactly what is coming. The Marquis leans forward slightly, his eyes sharp. Arabella's dowry, the marriage contract. He hopes £5,000 a year will be sufficient to restore Winmere properly and maintain the appropriate standard. The silence that follows is shocked. £5,000 annually. It is more than Nathaniel had hoped for in his wildest dreams. More than he had dared to dream on the nights he stared at Winmere's cracked ceiling, wondering how he would pay the few servants the following month. It is the complete salvation of Winmere. It is the total reconstruction of the Ashbourne name in a generation. It is the guarantee that his mother will never need to depend on the charity of distant relatives in cold houses. It is also the gilded cage for his soul for the rest of his life. Nathaniel swallows hard, his throat tight. That is extremely generous, my lord. Very generous indeed. The Marquis smiles, satisfied as a cat with cream. Excellent. My solicitor in Lincoln's Inn will prepare the documents in the coming weeks. They can announce the engagement officially at Lady Ashford's ball next week. It will be the event of the season. Arabella claps her hands delicately, her eyes shining with anticipated happiness. Oh, Papa, it will be absolutely wonderful. Lady Henrietta raises her glass of Bordeaux wine in a toast. Perfect. Absolutely perfect in every respect. Nathaniel forces a smile that feels false on his face. He raises his crystal glass when the toast is proposed by all. But his eyes keep returning to the empty chair beside Arabella, the place with the untouched porcelain plate and the napkin still folded in the shape of a swan. The place where Clara should be, the place she chose to abandon. He wonders if she is in her chambers now at this moment, looking out the window at the dark garden, thinking of him, or if she has finally managed to do what he cannot and simply stop caring completely. That night, after the dinner ends with pudding and brandy, and the gentlemen smoke expensive Cuban cigars in the mahogany-paneled library, and the ladies converse in the yellow saloon about wedding dresses, Nathaniel finds an excuse to escape. He needs fresh air urgently, he says, hand on his chest. The cigar smoke was too strong for his war-affected lungs. No one questions a war hero. No one notices when he slips out the side door that leads to the scented garden. The Lynden residence garden is extensive and elaborately planned in the French fashion. Rose bushes carefully pruned into perfect geometric shapes, ornate fountains with marble statues of Greek gods, painted wooden pavilions hidden among boxwood shrubs. It is there, in one of these pavilions far from the main house and its lit windows, that Nathaniel finds her. Clara is sitting on a cold stone bench, a forgotten book closed beside her, looking up at the starry sky, rare in this year of clouds. She does not seem surprised when he appears on the gravel path. It is as if she were waiting, as if she knew he would inevitably come. Could not sleep, he asks softly, approaching. Nor you, apparently, she replies without looking at him, her voice tired. Nathaniel approaches slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might flee at any sudden movement. Why did you not come to dinner? I needed to see you. Clara finally looks at him, the full moonlight on her pale face. Because I am not a masochist, Nathaniel. There is a limit to how much I can pretend I am not dying inside. A limit to watching you plan a life with my sister. He takes another step, now within reach of touching her. Do you think it is easy for me? Sitting at that table, hearing about wedding dresses and dowries, planning a future I do not want with every fiber of my being? Clara stands up abruptly. Then do not do it. It is as simple as that. Nathaniel feels the frustration rise again, as if it were so simple. £5,000 a year. Winmere saved. My mother secure. Clara turns to him completely, her face showing raw emotion. It is simple. You just choose. Winmere or... She cannot finish the sentence. Nathaniel closes the distance between them in 2 steps. Or you. Is that what you are asking? That I choose you over everything? The silence that falls is heavy with everything unsaid in the last 6 years. All the unwritten letters, all the swallowed words. Clara takes a deep breath, her shoulders trembling slightly. Her voice breaks when she speaks. No, I am not asking for anything, because I know you have already chosen, as you always do, the safest option, the most respectable, the one that requires no real sacrifice. Nathaniel feels anger and pain mixed. That is not fair. You do not understand the pressure. Clara laughs bitterly. I do not. Then tell me, Nathaniel, if I asked you right now, if I begged you on my knees to refuse Arabella, to defy my family, to risk everything including Winmere, would you do it? The pause that follows is long, agonizing, honest. Nathaniel opens his mouth, closes it. The words do not come because they both know the true answer. Clara shakes her head, tears beginning to fall. Exactly. You would not. And I would not ask, because it would be cruel to everyone. Because unlike you, Nathaniel, I have learned that love is not enough. It never was in our class. Nathaniel tries to say her name, but she continues, the words pouring out now like a broken dam. Do you know what my husband told me on our wedding night? When he took me to bed for the first time? He said I was a consolation prize, that he had wanted to marry a duke's daughter, but my father offered a larger dowry, and he had debts. 4 years, Nathaniel. 4 years of being treated like merchandise, like a bargaining chip in negotiations of men smoking cigars. Her voice becomes lower, more vulnerable, breaking. And yet, not once in those 4 long, empty years did I feel the pain I feel now, watching you with Arabella, knowing that this time the choice was yours, and you consciously rejected me. Nathaniel does not think, does not plan. Instinct stronger than reason. He simply pulls her to him forcefully and kisses her. It is a kiss of 6 years of silence and unsent letters, of 5 years of war and dreams of her face, of weeks of torture watching her from afar without being able to touch. It is desperate, hungry, impossible, and wrong. For a moment that feels like an eternity. Clara yields. Her hands grip his lapels tightly. Her body melts against his like wax near a flame. It is everything she remembered on lonely nights, and everything she tried to forget when awake. And then reality returns like ice water. She pulls away abruptly, panting, her lips swollen. No. No, you cannot do this and then marry my sister. You cannot kiss me and then exchange rings with her. Nathaniel tries to reach for her, holding out his hands, but she stumbles back. Stay away from me, Nathaniel. Stay away and marry Arabella. Be the respectable viscount your mother wants. But do not ask me to watch it up close. Do not torture me like this. What do you want me to do? He asks desperately, his voice hoarse. Clara's answer is final, decisive, painful. I want you to let me go. For the second time. And this time, do not expect me to wait around like a fool. This time I am leaving. She runs, her skirts brushing the damp grass, her footsteps disappearing into the dark garden. Nathaniel is left alone in the pavilion, the taste of her still on his lips, the sound of her running echoing in his heart. And for the first time since returning from war, seeing men die, he allows himself to break completely. Tears that did not fall at Waterloo fall now. That same night, Clara does not sleep. She sits at her rosewood desk as the tallow candle burns low, casting dancing shadows on the floral-papered walls. She writes a letter with hands that tremble slightly, smudging a few words. It is a letter to her aunt, Lady Margaret Hartley, who lives in Bath at the Springs. A respectable widow with her own means inherited from a merchant husband and a house large enough to receive a niece who needs to escape London urgently. In the letter, Clara asks for temporary asylum. She explains with carefully chosen words that she needs to leave London, that she cannot remain under the same roof while her sister marries the man she loves. She does not mention Nathaniel by name. She does not need to. Some pains are too deep to be put into words that other people will read and perhaps judge. At dawn, as the first gray rays appear, the letter is ready to be sent. Clara seals it with red wax and presses her silver signet. She looks out the window at the garden, where, hours ago, everything changed and nothing changed. Goodbye, Nathaniel, she whispers to the empty morning air. This time, I am the one leaving first. A week later, Lady Ashford holds her famous annual masquerade ball, the most anticipated event of the social season that everyone discusses for months. The ballroom of her residence in Grosvenor Square is transformed into a Venetian fantasy scene. Colorful silk masks and exotic feathers in every imaginable color. Gowns more daring than would be allowed at ordinary balls. Temporary anonymity that allows for audacities that daylight does not forgive. It is here, at this masquerade ball, that the engagement of Lord Nathaniel Ashbourne and Miss Arabella Lynden will be officially announced at midnight. The entire society is present to witness. The bets at the St. James's clubs are being paid out. The matrons nod with satisfied approval. Everything is progressing exactly as it should according to the unwritten rules. Nathaniel wears a simple black velvet mask that covers only his eyes, leaving his jaw and mouth visible. Arabella is radiant in a white mask ornamented with real swan feathers and crystals. They dance. They smile. They play the part of a happy engaged couple with a perfection practiced for weeks. And somewhere in the crowded ballroom, hidden behind an emerald green mask that covers most of her face, leaving only her lips exposed, Clara watches for the last time. Tomorrow she leaves for Bath on the public coach, but tonight she allows herself to watch, to gather memories, to say a silent goodbye. Midnight approaches, when the clocks will strike the hour of the announcement. The tradition of the masquerade ball dictates that just before the revelation, there is one last dance where partners are chosen at random by lot. Masks can be exchanged between strangers, identities hidden for precious minutes. A moment of freedom before reality returns, and engagements are announced and fates are sealed permanently. The master of ceremonies announces the midnight dance with a trained theatrical voice. Ladies and gentlemen, the midnight dance. Choose your partners by fate, but let the mystery remain until the final chimes. The ballroom fills with laughter and movement as couples form in the deliberate confusion. In the planned confusion, Nathaniel loses sight of Arabella among the colorful masks. Someone touches his shoulder. A woman with an emerald green mask and a dark green silk dress. Without a word, she extends a gloved hand. He does not recognize the voice because she does not speak. But he recognizes the scent he dreamt of for 5 years of war in the trenches. French lavender and English roses. Clara. He should refuse. He should look for Arabella. He should maintain the distance Clara explicitly asked for. But he cannot. God help him. He cannot. He takes her hand and they move to the center of the floor as the waltz music begins. Slow and melancholic. They dance. And it is as if the entire world disappears into mist. No words are exchanged. No impossible promises. Just the movement of bodies perfectly synchronized as if the 6 years of separation had never happened. As if they were still those young people in the garden. Their hands fit together as they always did. Palm to palm. The weight of her hand on his shoulder is familiar, right? Inevitable. Her breath mixes with his as he spins her to the rhythm of the music. Clara closes her eyes behind the green mask. She allows herself, for 3 minutes stolen from fate, to pretend he is hers. To pretend time has not passed and left no scars. To pretend society does not matter and that love is enough, as in the novels. The waltz gradually speeds up. They spin faster. The ballroom becomes a blur of colors and candlelight and unknown masked faces. Nathaniel pulls her closer, closer than is appropriate by any rule, closer than he should in public. He whispers against her hair, pinned up with combs. "Do not leave. Please, do not go to Bath." Clara replies in a broken voice, barely audible. "You know I must. I cannot stay." Nathaniel continues, the words coming out in a desperation he cannot control. "Then run away with me, tonight, right now. Leave everything behind and let us be free." Clara laughs sadly through the mask. "And live how? As social pariahs? Ruined and despised by everyone we know?" Nathaniel squeezes her hand with an almost painful tightness. "Alive. We would live alive, Clara. Finally, alive. For the first time in years, we would be real." The music reaches its dramatic climax. The last chord echoes in the high-ceilinged ballroom. Couples separate, applaud politely. Prepare for the unmasking at midnight and the return to cruel reality. Nathaniel still holds Clara's hand. He does not want to let go. If he lets go, she will disappear again. And this time it will be forever. He knows this. Clara says low, urgent, desperate. Let me go. Before anyone realizes who I am. Nathaniel shakes his head like a stubborn child. I cannot. Clara tries again, more forcefully. Nathaniel, please. A female voice cuts through the air behind them, high-pitched and uncertain and painful. Lord Ashbourne? They turn slowly, like convicts. Arabella is there. Her white mask still in place but recognizable by the crystal-clear voice, the dress with its specific ribbons, the posture Nathaniel already knows. And for a terrible moment, no one moves. No one breathes. The ballroom continues around them, but the three of them are trapped in a bubble of absolute silence. Arabella speaks in a small, almost childish voice, trembling. I was looking for you, for the final dance before the announcement. The silence that follows is awkward, suffocating as smoke. Nathaniel tries to recover, letting go of Clara's hand. Miss Lynden, I did not know. Arabella interrupts him, her voice trembling visibly. Who is she? Your dance partner. Who is she? Nathaniel tries to lie, but the words will not come. I do not. The masks are... But Arabella is beyond accepting easy lies, her eyes no longer so innocent. You were holding her hand as if you knew her intimately, as if it meant something deep. People around them begin to notice the tension, to stop dancing, to watch with morbid interest. Whispers start to circulate behind fans like fire in dry grass. Clara turns to leave, but Arabella takes a step forward, blocking her path with unexpected courage. Show your face. Please, I need to know. Clara replies in a low, devastated, recognizable voice. Arabella, do not do this here. Arabella recognizes the voice immediately, shock crossing her face. Clara? Is it you? It cannot be you. She removes her own white mask with hands trembling violently. Her face is pale as snow, eyes wide with shock and pain she cannot hide. You? And him? You were... She cannot finish the sentence, the reality being too much. Clara tries desperately to explain. Arabella, it is not what you think. I never wanted. But Arabella interrupts her, her voice breaking into pieces. It is not? Then what is it? Explain it to me, Clara. Explain how my own sister was dancing with my fiancé like lovers in a forbidden novel. The ballroom has fallen completely silent now. All dancing has stopped. All eyes are on the trio in the center. This is the kind of scandal that high society lives to witness and will dissect for months. Lady Henrietta appears through the crowd, her face livid with absolute horror. The Marquis of Lynden approaches with heavy, echoing steps, his expression furious, that of a betrayed father. What is happening here? He thunders, making people draw back. Lord Ashbourne, explain yourself, immediately. Nathaniel tries, his voice failing. My lord, I can explain. The Marquess interrupts him with a raised hand. You were dancing with my eldest daughter. On the night you were supposed to announce your engagement to the youngest, in front of all of London society. He pauses, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Is there something I should know, Lord Ashburn? Something that would significantly change our agreement? Nathaniel looks at Clara, her face still partially hidden by the mask, but visible tears streaming down her cheeks. He looks at Arabella, so young, so hurt, betrayed by her sister and the man who was supposed to become her husband. He looks at his mother, horror and disappointment and fury competing in her controlled expression. And then he looks at the Marquess, absolute power, final judgment that can destroy him completely. And in this moment, Nathaniel realizes something fundamental. He survived Waterloo. He saw better men than him die in mud and blood. He lived when he should have died. And for what? To lie? To live a false life? To betray the only woman he has ever truly loved? No. Yes, my lord, Nathaniel says. his voice low but firm, clear. "There is something you should know." Collective breaths are held throughout the ballroom. The entire room waits, eager. "I cannot marry Miss Arabella." The explosion of whispers is immediate, muffled exclamations behind fans and gloved hands, squeals of shock. Arabella sobs, her entire body shaking. "Nathaniel, please, do not do this here. Not like this." Nathaniel turns to her, his voice gentle despite the unshakable firmness. "I am sorry, Miss Lynden. Truly, from the bottom of my heart. You deserve someone who chooses you above all else, who loves you without reservations or doubts. I cannot be that man because my heart is not free to give," Arabella asks between freely falling tears, her voice that of a lost child. "Because of her? Because of Clara?" Nathaniel replies after a weighted pause. "Yes, because of her. It has always been because of her." The ballroom erupts in chaos. Voices rise in indignation and excitement. Absolute scandal that will be told and retold. This will be the subject of conversations for months, perhaps years. Lady Henrietta advances through the crowd, furious as never before, her face contorted. "Nathaniel Alexander Ashbourne, you are destroying everything. Our entire family, our entire future." Nathaniel turns to his mother without fear. "No, mother. For the first time I am saving myself. I am choosing truth. Lady Henrietta is beyond reason. Winmere will be auctioned. Our name will be mud." Nathaniel nods calmly. "Winmere may be auctioned. Our name may be sullied. But I will not live a lie. Not anymore. Not after everything I have seen and survived." The Marquis speaks with a voice cold as winter. "Are you aware of the full consequences of this foolish choice?" Nathaniel meets his eyes. "I am fully aware, my lord." The Marquis continues, each word a sentence. "You will be socially ruined. No respectable family will receive you. Winmere will be lost forever. And as for Clara?" He pauses heavily, letting the silence do its work. "If you imagine that I will allow my widowed daughter to be involved with a man who has publicly humiliated her and destroyed her sister's prospects, you are deeply mistaken. You have brought shame upon both my daughters." Nathaniel frowns, confused by the logic. "Humiliated? How?" The Marquis explodes with a voice that echoes. "You courted Arabella publicly while secretly desiring Clara. You made my daughters the object of gossip and scandal. Clara will be associated with this shame for the rest of her life. No respectable man will have her now." He turns to Clara with fatherly fury. "You, Clara, come with me, now, immediately. And you, Lord Ashburn, never approach either of my daughters again as long as I live." Clara tries, her voice broken. "Father, please, it is not his fault, The Marquis shouts in a way that makes the entire ballroom fall silent. Silence. The echo is shocking. When he speaks again, his voice is lower, but dangerous as poison. "You have already caused enough damage, Clara. This family's reputation, your younger sister's happiness, all sullied by your moral weakness, by your inability to control inappropriate feelings." Clara pales as if she has been physically struck, her body faltering. Nathaniel takes a step forward, protective and furious. "Do not speak to her like that. She has done nothing wrong." The Marquis laughs bitterly. "You no longer have the right to address me or my family, Lord Ashburn. You have lost that right. This conversation is permanently over." The Marquis takes Clara's arm with a firmness that will leave marks. Arabella is already being led by older ladies out of the ballroom, sobbing on their compassionate shoulders. Clara looks back one last time before being dragged away. Her eyes meet Nathaniel's across the crowd. And in that look is everything that cannot be said in words in front of hundreds. Love, pain, forgiveness, goodbye, impossible hope. She mouths the words silently, just for him to see. "I am sorry. So sorry." And then they are gone, father dragging daughter, leaving destruction in their wake. Nathaniel is left alone in the center of the ballroom, hundreds of eyes judging him, whispers cutting like sharp razors, masks falling to reveal shocked and delighted faces. His mother approaches one last time, her face transformed into a mask of stone. You have destroyed everything I built. I hope she was worth it, because you will pay this price for the rest of your life. She turns and walks away stiffly, leaving Nathaniel completely alone. And Nathaniel, for the first time in his life, does not care about society's opinion or strangers' approval, because he has finally told the truth, finally chosen with courage. But the woman he has chosen is beyond his reach, dragged away by a furious father and a society that never forgives deviations. The scandal spreads through London faster than fire in dry August. By the grey dawn, all of society knows the story in exaggerated detail. Lord Ashburn rejected Miss Arabella Lynden publicly at the masquerade ball, for her older sister, at the very ball where the engagement was to be announced at midnight. It is the kind of scandal that ruins lives permanently, that destroys reputations built over entire generations. The Morning Post carries a headline in large letters, "Shocking Scandal at Lady Ashford's Ball. Viscount of Winmere breaks engagement spectacularly. Lynden family devastated. Society in complete uproar." Nathaniel crumples the newspaper forcefully and throws it into the cold fireplace. At Winmere, Nathaniel is completely alone for the first time. Lady Henrietta left at dawn in a hired carriage for her sister's house in Yorkshire, refusing to witness the complete destruction of the Ashbourne name. The 3 remaining servants also left without notice, knowing there would be no wages now that the advantageous marriage was publicly destroyed. The mansion is empty, silent, cold as a tomb. Nathaniel walks the empty corridors once more, but this time he feels no despair or regret. He feels something unexpected. Peace. A strange, unexpected, cleansing peace. He chose her. He finally chose love over duty. Now he needs to find her. Needs to make her understand that this time he will not give up. This time he will fight the entire world if necessary. At the Lynden residence, Clara is completely confined. Her chamber door is literally locked from the outside now. Her father's decree is clear and inflexible. She will not leave the house until the scandal subsides, if it ever does. She will receive no visitors. She will send no correspondence anywhere. It is domestic prison, punishment for having brought shame to the Lynden family name. Arabella enters Clara's chambers for the first time in 3 terrible days. The sisters have not spoken since the awful ball. Arabella has been in her own chambers, alternating between silent tears and catatonic silence. Clara expected anger when they finally met, violent accusations, perhaps even physical violence. But when Arabella lifts her red, swollen eyes, there is something different there. Not blind rage, painful understanding. "You loved him," she says, her voice tired as if she has not slept. It is not a question. It is a statement of known fact. "Before me. Long before," Clara replies in a low voice, hoarse from crying. "Yes, since I was 20. Since before the war separated everything." Arabella asks with genuine curiosity. "For how long exactly?" Clara closes her eyes. 6 years. Since before he left. Since before I married Sir Edmund." Arabella sits slowly on the bed, processing. "Then why did you never say anything? Why did you let Papa arrange the courtship? Let me develop feelings?" Clara tries to explain, guilt crushing. "Because I thought I was over it after 6 years. Because he was lost to me. Because you deserved a chance at happiness, and I was not going to steal that." Arabella shakes her head sadly. But it was not real happiness, was it? It was based on a lie and omission. I was falling in love with a version of him that did not exist. The silence that falls between them is heavy, but not hostile, as Clara had feared. Arabella continues in a softer, more mature voice than Clara has ever heard. "Do you know what is worse, Clara? It is not that he rejected me publicly. It is that I knew, deep down. I saw how he looked at you when he thought no one was noticing, how he tensed up when you entered the room, how he always asked about you, trying to sound casual but failing completely." She takes a painful pause. I pretended not to notice because I wanted to believe he would learn to love me eventually, that I would be enough if I just tried harder. But I always knew I was competing with a ghost. Clara sits beside her sister, tears falling. Arabella, you are enough. You are wonderful and young and beautiful and kind. Any man would be lucky. Arabella interrupts her gently. But I am not you. And it is all right now, because I realize I do not want to be loved out of obligation or convenience. I want to be chosen like he chose you, even if it cost everything. Clara feels tears falling freely now. It does not matter anymore. Papa will never allow me to see him again. He will send me somewhere far away. Arabella stands up, firmer than Clara has ever seen her. Papa does not have to control everything. Not anymore. Clara looks up, surprised. What are you saying? Arabella takes a deep, decisive breath. I am saying I am going to talk to Papa now. I am going to tell him I forgive you, that I understand, that this scandal has taught me something crucial about what really matters. Clara tries to protest, panic rising. Arabella, no. You will be dragged even further into the scandal if you defend me. But Arabella is resolute. I am already in the middle of the scandal, Clara. The difference is I can choose how to respond. I can be the foolish young woman who was deceived and victimized, or I can be the generous woman who understands that love is not possession or property. She moves towards the door with decisive steps. I will choose the second option because that is who I want to be. The door closes behind her, leaving Clara alone with tears falling freely. Tears of guilt, of unexpected relief, of deep love for the sister she had completely underestimated. Arabella finds her father in the mahogany-paneled library, where he is dealing with the disastrous social consequences of the scandal. Letters of apology to write to dozens of families. Cancellations of invitations received daily. Calculations of how much permanent damage has been done to the Lynden name that took generations to build. The Marquis does not even look up when she enters, his pen scratching on paper. Arabella, you should be resting in your chambers. Arabella closes the door firmly behind her. I need to speak with you, Papa, about Clara and about everything that happened. The Marquis sighs deeply, putting the pen aside. There is nothing to discuss. Clara will be sent to Bath tomorrow, to live with your aunt indefinitely. It is better this way for everyone. Arabella asks with a firmer voice than he expected to hear. Better for whom, exactly? The Marquis finally looks at his younger daughter with impatience. For everyone. For you, who will not have a constant reminder of the betrayal. For Clara, who needs distance to reflect on her selfish actions. For our family, which needs time for the scandal to pass and be forgotten by society. Arabella replies simply, but with conviction. It was not betrayal. The Marquis frowns, confused. What do you mean it was not betrayal? She danced with your fiancé. Arabella shakes her head. Clara did not betray me because she loved Lord Ashburn years before I did. Years before Papa arranged the courtship. I knew it on some deep level and pretended not to because it was convenient. The fault is mine as much as theirs for allowing the farce to continue. The Marquis tries to interrupt with authority. You are young and naive. You do not understand the complexities. But Arabella does not let him finish, her voice rising. No. You do not understand. You treat me like a porcelain child, but I am an 18-year-old woman with my own mind. And I know enough to recognize true love when I see it, even if it hurts. She continues, words pouring out. Lord Ashbourne never truly loved me. He tried, out of duty perhaps, but he could not because he already loved Clara for 6 years. And I do not want a man who has to force himself to love me. The Marquis stands up, irritated and confused. And you find this acceptable? That he used you as a piece in a game? Arabella shakes her head vigorously. I think we were all victims of society's cruel expectations. He needed to marry for money to save Winmere. I needed to marry for position to satisfy Papa. Clara needed to remain invisible as an obedient widow. But no one asked what we truly wanted, what we felt in our hearts. The Marquis replies with a hard, traditional voice. Feelings are a luxury for poets, Arabella. Responsibility, duty, lineage, those are the realities that have governed families like ours for centuries. Arabella looks her father in the eye without flinching for the first time. Then I prefer to live in the luxury of feelings, Papa, because a life without genuine feelings is not worth living, no matter how many titles we have. The silence that follows is shocked and heavy. The Marquis has never heard his younger daughter, his obedient girl, speak like this with such conviction. You do not know what you are saying right now. Arabella holds firm. I know exactly. And I am telling you this clearly. Either you allow Clara to live her life as she chooses, including seeing Lord Ashburn if she wishes, or you will lose both your daughters. The Marquis leans over the desk, trying to intimidate. Are you threatening me, girl? Arabella does not back down an inch. I am setting boundaries of respect. Clara taught me that through her painful sacrifice, her silent pain. She always put my happiness before hers, sacrificed her own feelings to protect me from hurt. Now it is my turn to protect her. Let her be free, Papa. Please, I beg you. The Marquis looks at his younger daughter as if seeing her for the first time truly. When did she become this strong, decisive, independent woman? When did she stop being the obedient girl who accepted all his decisions without questioning once? He sits down slowly, the weight of years seeming to fall on him. The scandal is still raw, he says more calmly. Society will not easily forget something so dramatic. Arabella sits too, leaning forward. Then we will give them something new to talk about soon. I will make a point of appearing in public with dignity, of holding my head high without shame, of showing that I am not destroyed or victimized. I will show that a woman can survive a broken engagement and come out stronger and wiser. The Marquis considers her words in heavy silence. Finally, he sighs deeply, like a defeated man. And Clara? What does she truly want? Arabella replies without hesitation. She wants to be free to make her own choices, to live her life without being defined by others' expectations or past mistakes. The Marquis nods slowly. And if that choice includes Lord Ashbourne, a man who is now completely socially ruined? Arabella smiles sadly, but with wisdom. Then she will have true love, which is more than many women of our position have in arranged marriages. The Marquis looks out the library window at the garden where his daughters played when they were small and innocent. He remembers Clara at 7, always reading thick books, always questioning everything. Different from other girls who played with dolls. Deeper, as Arabella said. He tried to mold her into what society expected of a proper woman. And in the process, he realizes now too late, he destroyed something precious and unique in her. Very well, he says finally with a tired voice. Clara may stay in London if she wishes. I will no longer interfere in her personal choices. She is an adult. But understand, both of you, that society will not be kind or forgiving. There will be permanent social consequences for all of us. Arabella stands up and kisses her father's wrinkled forehead with tenderness. Thank you, Papa. Thank you for trusting us. The best things in life always have consequences, but they are worth paying the price. 3 days after the scandal that shook London, Nathaniel receives a letter. It does not come by the formal royal post, but is delivered discreetly by a young maid who disappears quickly before he can ask who sent it or where it came from. He recognizes the handwriting immediately, his heart pounding. Clara. The letter is brief, but every word carries immense weight. Meet me in Kensington Gardens, near the Serpentine, at dawn tomorrow. Come alone, please. We have much to discuss. Nathaniel reads the words 3 times, as if they might change or disappear if he does not memorize them. She wants to see him. Despite everything, despite the scandal and her father's anger, and the judgment of all London society. He does not sleep that entire night. He stays awake, pacing the empty rooms of Winmere, planning what he will say, how he will explain, how he will convince her that this time is different. This time he will not run away. As the sky begins to lighten with the first shades of gray that precede the true dawn, he is already dressed and riding his horse towards London. London at dawn is a different city, almost unreal. The streets are empty except for a few laborers starting their days, milkmen and sweepers. Mist rises from the Thames and envelops everything in a ghostly haze. Nathaniel rides quickly, his heart beating faster with every step that brings him closer to the garden where everything might change. He finds her exactly where she said she would be, near the Serpentine, the artificial lake that reflects the slowly lightening gray sky. Clara is standing under a weeping willow, her simple walking dress in discreet shades of gray. No companion, no chaperone. A huge and deliberate social risk for a woman of her already sullied position. Nathaniel dismounts and stops a few meters away, suddenly unsure how to begin. Clara turns upon hearing his steps on the damp grass. They look at each other through the morning mist. "You came," she says, and there is genuine surprise in her voice. "You thought I would not come, after everything?" he asks, incredulous. Clara shrugs slightly. "I was not sure of anything anymore in this uncertain world." The silence that follows is laden with everything they need to say, and do not know where to start after so much. Finally, Nathaniel speaks hurriedly. "Clara, about the ball. I am so sorry for—" She raises a hand, interrupting him. "Do not apologize for telling the truth. You did what I did not have the courage to do. You told the truth when we were all living comfortable lies." Nathaniel takes a step forward. "But I destroyed your chances in society. I sullied your reputation permanently." Clara laughs softly, without bitterness. "My reputation was never pristine, Nathaniel. Widows are rarely seen as pure by society. And as for society in general, I am discovering I care less than I thought I would." But there is something heavier in her expression as she continues. "Arabella came to see me yesterday. We talked for the first time properly in all these years." Nathaniel feels guilt tighten his chest like a vice. She must hate me deeply for humiliating her like that. Clara shakes her head, surprising him. "She understands you better than you can possibly imagine. She knew, Nathaniel. From the beginning, she saw everything. She saw how you looked at me when you thought no one was noticing. And she chose to pretend she did not see because she wanted to believe in something impossible." Nathaniel closes his eyes briefly in pain. "We were all pretending then, following the script that society wrote for us generations ago." Clara nods in agreement. "But now the script has been publicly torn up. The question is, what do we write in its place? What story will we tell?" Nathaniel closes the distance between them with determined steps. His gaze is intense when he replies, "We write our own story for the first time. It does not matter what society thinks or says. It does not matter if Winmere is auctioned tomorrow. It does not matter if my mother never forgives me," Clara asks softly. "And what does our story say?" Nathaniel takes her cold hands in his, warming them. "It says that I was a coward 6 years ago when I left. That I left without saying goodbye because I was afraid that if I stayed and said goodbye, I would never have the courage to go to war. It says that every day of 5 years of war I thought of you constantly. That you were the reason I kept breathing when everything seemed lost and meaningless." Clara feels tears forming, her vision blurring. Nathaniel continues with intensity. "It says that when I returned and saw you again at that ball, I realized I had never stopped loving you for a second. That trying to do what was expected of me, courting Arabella, was impossible because my heart has always been yours since that first summer. It says that at the masquerade ball, when we danced, I knew I could not continue the lie for even one more day. That I would rather be ruined and honest than respected and false until I die." Clara is crying now, tears falling freely down her cheeks. "And what else does our story say?" she asks through her tears. Nathaniel brings his face close to hers until their foreheads touch. "It says that I love you more than life, that I have always loved you since I was 21, that I choose you above all else. Estates, titles, social approval, everything. That if you will have me, despite everything, I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." Clara laughs through her tears, a sound of joy mixed with pain. "We are a terrible pair of social scandals now." Nathaniel smiles truly for the first time in weeks, The best pairs are always the scandalous ones. Clara leans forward until their foreheads touch perfectly. I love you too. I always have. Even when I hated you for leaving. Even when I desperately tried to forget you. Even when I was married to another man and knew it was wrong, but could not stop. Nathaniel kisses her. Gently this time, not desperately as in the garden weeks ago. It is a kiss of promise, of commitment, of futures being rewritten together. When they separate, they are both smiling despite the tears, despite the uncertainty, despite all they have lost and all they might still lose. What do we do now? Clara asks practically. Nathaniel considers the reality. Winmere will be auctioned soon. I have no way to stop it now without the marriage. But I have my army pension, small but stable. It is not much, but we can live modestly. Clara shakes her head firmly. I have my own money. My dowry was returned to me when Sir Edmund died without heirs, as the marriage contract stipulated. And my mother left me an annual income of £200 in her will. We are not rich, but we will not starve or freeze. Nathaniel frowns, his male pride wounded. I cannot live on your money. It would be improper and humiliating. Clara laughs softly. Nathaniel, we have just destroyed every existing rule of propriety. I think we can ignore this one more. Besides, I prefer to think of it as our money if we marry, if you will have me, of course. Nathaniel understands what she is subtly asking. It is a proposal. Not traditional, not proper, completely scandalous. Exactly as they are now. He kneels there on the damp dawn grass, holding her hands in his. Lady Clara Lynden, will you do me the honor of marrying me? Knowing I cannot offer a grand house or high social position, knowing society will condemn us for years, knowing it will be difficult and sometimes painful. Clara pulls him up with surprising strength. Yes, 1,000 times yes, because you are all I have ever wanted since that first summer, and all I need to be happy. They kiss again as the sun finally breaks through the mist, casting golden light on the wet garden. It is a new dawn. A new beginning, a new story being written by two people who finally chose themselves above all else. The scandal naturally gets worse before it gets better, like a wound before it heals. When the news spreads that Lord Ashbourne and Lady Clara plan to marry despite everything, society goes into an absolute frenzy. It is unprecedented. It is outrageous. It is absolutely delicious to gossip about at every afternoon tea. Lady Henrietta sends a short letter from Yorkshire. It is brief and sharp as a razor. She will never acknowledge the marriage. Nathaniel is dead to her. May he live with the consequences of his foolish choices for the rest of his life. Nathaniel reads the letter once and burns it in the fireplace. Some bridges need to be burned so that new ones can be built on the ashes. Winmere is auctioned in May in a humiliating public auction. Nathaniel does not go to watch. He cannot watch his family's estate being divided among strangers buying furniture and land. Clara stays with him in the small lodgings they have rented in Bloomsbury, a less fashionable part of London far from Mayfair. She holds his hand as the clock strikes the exact hour of the auction. Do not look back, she whispers with wisdom. Only forward now. But there are unexpected surprises too. Arabella becomes an admired figure in certain progressive circles. Her grace under social pressure, her refusal to be victimized or blame others, her open and courageous defense of her sister earn her the respect of people tired of hypocrisy. Young women begin to see her as an example of how a woman can define her own terms instead of passively accepting fate. The Marquis, though never fully approving or forgiving, keeps his word to Arabella. He does not actively interfere. He continues to receive Clara on private family occasions, discreet dinners without guests. He never acknowledges Nathaniel publicly or invites him to events, but he also does not openly condemn him in society. It is the most they can realistically expect from a man of his generation and position. 3 months after the scandal that changed everything, in a small chapel in Hampstead far from the hungry eyes of high society, Nathaniel and Clara marry. There are no grand festivities with hundreds of guests, no orchestra or exotic flowers, just Arabella as Clara's courageous witness, an old war comrade of Nathaniel's named Captain Morrison, and an old vicar who asks no questions about past scandals or futures. Clara wears a simple sky-blue silk dress, not virginal white. Nathaniel wears his best brown civilian coat, not his military uniform, which now carries too many memories of another time. When the vicar asks if he takes this woman, Nathaniel replies with a clear voice that echoes in the empty chapel. I do. More than anything in this world or the next. When Clara is asked, she smiles through happy tears. I do. I finally accept my own destiny. The kiss that seals the marriage is witnessed by few, but it is truer than many kisses exchanged in crowded cathedrals with all of society watching and judging. When they leave the chapel as husband and wife, the sun is shining brightly. A truly beautiful August day in 1816, finally breaking the pattern of cold and rain that defined the year without a summer. 2 years pass. London, 1818. The scandal has not been completely forgotten, but it has been pushed to the back of society's collective memory by newer, fresher, more dramatic scandals. Lord Ashburn and Lady Clara live a quiet but satisfying life. Nathaniel works as a private consultant for the War Office, his battlefield experience valued even if his social position is not. Clara writes, something she always wanted to do, but was never allowed as it was not proper. Her romantic stories, published under the male pseudonym of C.L. Thornhill, gain quiet popularity among female readers who do not know the true identity of the scandalous author. They live in a small but comfortable house in Chelsea near the river. It is not Winmere with its acres. It is not a mansion in Mayfair, but it has a walled garden where wild roses grow freely, and rooms full of books on every wall, and wide windows that let in natural light. It is a true home in a way Winmere never was, because it was chosen for love, not inherited by obligation. One rainy spring afternoon, there is a firm knock on the door. Nathaniel opens it to find a distinguished-looking older man, a solicitor by his posture and sober clothes. The man introduces himself politely as Mr. Pemberton, legal representative of the late Marquis of Winmere, a distant third cousin of his father's whom Nathaniel barely remembers meeting in childhood. The solicitor explains with legal precision that the distant Marquis died 2 months ago without direct heirs, leaving Nathaniel as the closest male relative, and Winmere, which was bought at auction by a land speculator named Mr. Burton, is for sale again after the speculator lost his fortune in bad investments in South America. The distant cousin, a man of rigid principles who violently disapproved of Nathaniel's gambling father's actions, left substantial funds in his will specifically for Nathaniel to buy back Winmere if the opportunity arose. He was a man who believed that ancestral estates should remain in the correct family hands. It is not the entire fortune that was lost at the gaming tables, the solicitor continues, taking documents from his leather briefcase, but it is enough to buy the property back and begin to restore it properly over years. Nathaniel is in complete shock, unable to process. Clara, who heard the conversation from the adjoining room where she was writing, comes to stand beside him. She takes his slightly trembling hand. It is your choice, she says low but firm. We do not have to go back if you do not want to. We can be perfectly happy where we are now. Nathaniel looks at her, at the woman who chose him when he had absolutely nothing to offer, at the woman who is carrying their first child, a small curve just beginning to show under her simple muslin dress. He thinks of Winmere, of the empty corridors and broken windows of his memories, but also of the good memories of childhood before everything fell apart, of the garden where he picked wild roses for a 20-year-old woman who stole his heart forever, of the potential of what it could be, not a prison of suffocating social expectations, but a true home for the family they are building with love. He turns to the patient solicitor. I accept the inheritance. I will buy back Winmere. The solicitor smiles, satisfied, and hands over the legal documents for signature. There is a specific condition in the will, he mentions, adjusting his spectacles. The distant Marquis clearly specified that Winmere must be restored not to impress society or flaunt wealth, but as a true home, a place of joy and family, not of empty appearances. Nathaniel laughs genuinely. That I can promise very easily. Autumn, 1818. Winmere Hall is being carefully restored, not to its former opulent cold glory, but to something different and better. Warmer, more alive, more human. The broken windows are repaired with new glass and let in abundant light. The walls are painted in light, cheerful colors, not the dark shades of deep green and brown that his father preferred. The garden is completely redesigned, with less rigid geometric formality and more wild flowers growing freely. Clara is heavily pregnant now at 8 months, but insists on personally supervising the decoration of each room. She chooses comfortable furniture instead of impressive or expensive pieces. Bookshelves in every room because a house without books is not a true home. Light curtains that let in light instead of heavy velvet that blocked everything. Nathaniel watches her direct workman with gentle efficiency and natural authority and falls in love with her all over again every day. One golden October afternoon, as they rest in the partially restored garden breathing in the fresh air, Arabella comes to visit in her own carriage. She is engaged now to a second son of an earl named Mr. James Whitmore, who genuinely loves her for who she is and whom she chose freely after an honest courtship. It is not the most brilliant marriage she could have made by social standards, but it is real and based on mutual respect. She radiates happiness in a way she never did when she was being courted by Nathaniel out of obligation. The two sisters embrace warmly with genuine affection. The tension that existed between them for so long has completely disappeared, replaced by deep understanding. Arabella brings news from London, of gossip they can now laugh about instead of fear. She recounts animatedly that Lady Henrietta was seen at a social event for the first time in 2 years. She did not ask about Nathaniel directly, but she also did not leave the event when his name was mentioned in conversation. It is real progress, Arabella says with sincere optimism. Nathaniel joins them in the garden, bringing hot tea and biscuits on a silver tray. Arabella greets him warmly without any remaining awkwardness. They have become unlikely friends through all the pain, united by a shared love for Clara. She asks how the restoration of the house is going. Nathaniel looks at the house behind them with its new shining windows, at Clara beside him with her hands on her belly, at the garden where wild roses are beginning to bloom again after years of neglect. It is becoming a true home finally, he replies simply, with peace. Arabella smiles with a wisdom beyond her years. That is all that really matters in the end, is it not? Not titles or positions or what society thinks or says. Just being truly happy with whom you have chosen to love. Clara squeezes Nathaniel's hand tightly. Exactly that. It was always that. There is a deep peace between the three of them that seemed absolutely impossible 2 years ago. They survived the scandal that should have destroyed them. More than survived. They grew through it and became stronger. Winter, 1818. The first heavy snow falls on Winmere, covering everything in a pure white blanket that hides imperfections. Inside the house, now warmed by lit fireplaces and alive with purpose, Clara is in labor. Nathaniel paces nervously in the corridor as the experienced midwife works with the help of maids. He survived 5 years of war, constantly seeing death, but he has never felt fear like this. The fear of losing the woman he finally chose. The fear that the happiness they have built is all too temporary. Hours pass slowly like torture. The night falls, cold and dark. And then, finally, the cry of a strong, healthy baby. The midwife opens the door, smiling with professional satisfaction. A boy, my lord, healthy and strong. And Lady Clara is well. Tired, but well. The relief Nathaniel feels is so intense his knees almost buckle beneath him. He enters the candlelit room. Clara is pale but radiant as never before, holding a small bundle of white linen in her arms. She looks up as he enters, and her smile lights up the room more than any candle could. "Come meet your son," she whispers, her voice hoarse. Nathaniel approaches slowly, reverently, as in a church. She places the baby carefully in his inexperienced arms. The boy has dark hair like his, But the eyes, when they open briefly, have Clara's green color. He is small, perfect, impossible to believe. "This is our son," Nathaniel says with absolute awe in his voice. "Our family built by choice." Clara nods, tears of happiness streaming down her tired face. Built not on obligation or expectation, but on true love. Nathaniel sits carefully on the edge of the bed, still holding the baby, afraid of breaking him. "What shall we call him?" he asks softly. Clara has already thought about it for months. "Thomas." It means twin, but it also represents duality. Two lives united against everything. Two people who found each other twice and finally stayed together. Nathaniel smiles through his own tears. Thomas Ashbourne. Perfect in every way. They sit in silence for a long moment, the three of them together as the snow continues to fall silently outside, covering the world in white peace. Society still does not accept them completely. Lady Henrietta still has not spoken to Nathaniel directly. There are challenges ahead, financial difficulties to manage, social judgments that will never completely end. But here, in this warmed room in a restored Winmere, with the woman he loves and the son they created together, Nathaniel finally feels he is exactly where he belongs, not where society said he should be, not where cruel obligation placed him, but where courageous choice and true love brought him. Clara touches his face gently with her free hand. "Was it worth it?" she asks low, not about money or estates, but about all they sacrificed, all they faced together. Nathaniel kisses her forehead gently. Every second of suffering, every scandal, every look of disapproval. It was worth every moment because it brought me here, with you, with our family. Spring, 1820. 2 full years later. Winmere is completely transformed into something new. The garden is blooming abundantly, the rose bushes laden with flowers in every color. The house is full of real life, of a child's laughter echoing through the corridors, of books scattered on tables, of shared meals in the warm kitchen. Thomas is beginning to speak in complete sentences, his first words bringing infinite joy to his parents. An elegant carriage arrives one sunny April afternoon. Nathaniel is in the garden with Thomas, teaching the boy about different flowers and their names. He looks up, frowning with curiosity. They were not expecting visitors. Clara comes out of the house where she was working on her new novel, equally curious and slightly apprehensive. The carriage is elegant and expensive, and when the door opens slowly, Lady Henrietta steps down with the coachman's help. She is older, more fragile than Nathaniel remembers, the years weighing visibly. But her eyes are the same, sharp and assessing. She looks at the restored house with attention, at the blooming garden with reluctant approval, at the grandson she has never met playing on the grass. The silence is tense, uncomfortable, laden with 2 years of separation. Nathaniel does not know what to say. He had not expected this day to come. Lady Henrietta speaks first, her voice softer than he remembers from all his childhood years. "The house is beautiful," she admits. "Better than in your father's days with all that darkness." Nathaniel nods cautiously. "We tried to make it a true home, not a monument to appearances." Lady Henrietta looks at Thomas, who has stopped playing and is staring at the stranger with childish curiosity. "This is your son?" she asks, her voice breaking slightly, though she clearly knows the answer. Nathaniel pulls Thomas close protectively. "This is Thomas. Thomas, this is your grandmother." Thomas waves shyly with a small hand. Lady Henrietta kneels with difficulty, her old knees protesting painfully. "Hello, Thomas. May I hug you?" Thomas looks at his father, who nods encouragingly after exchanging a look with Clara. The boy goes shyly into his grandmother's arms, which have waited so long for him. Lady Henrietta hugs him, and when she looks up, there are tears there that Nathaniel has never seen her shed, not even at his father's funeral. "I am sorry," she says, low but clearly, "for everything. For pressuring you into something you did not want. For letting my foolish pride stop me from knowing my grandson for 2 years. Nathaniel feels his own throat tighten with emotion. Mother, I am sorry too. Lady Henrietta shakes her head, interrupting. No. Let me finish what I need to say. I spent 2 years in Yorkshire reflecting on my life, on how I raised you, on the choices I made, prioritizing position over happiness. I realized I repeated your father's mistakes, valuing appearance over real substance, social position over true love. She stands up slowly, still holding Thomas. When I heard about the restoration of Winmere, about how you and Lady Clara built a life together despite all the obstacles, I realized you did what your father never could. You chose love over easy convenience, and you built something genuinely real. Clara approaches, gently touching Lady Henrietta's arm with compassion. You are welcome here, Lady Ashbourne. You always were, always will be. Lady Henrietta looks at Clara, really looks for the first time with open eyes. I see now why my son chose you. It is not just your beauty or your lineage. It is your true strength, your genuine kindness. She pauses emotionally. May I stay a few days? I would very much like to get to know my grandson properly, and perhaps rebuild the relationship with my son if he will forgive me. Nathaniel feels something undo in his chest, a tension he has carried for years finally released. We would be honored, Mother. Very honored. Lady Henrietta smiles, and it is genuine this time, not the social smile she always wore as a mask. Thank you for forgiving me when I did not deserve forgiveness. Thomas tugs on his grandmother's skirt with childish curiosity. Do you like flowers? He asks with the direct simplicity of childhood. Lady Henrietta laughs, a sound Nathaniel has not heard in years, perhaps decades. I do indeed, my dear. Can you show me your garden? Thomas takes her gloved hand and begins to pull her, chattering excitedly about roses and lilies and all the flowers his father taught him. Nathaniel and Clara stand together, hand in hand, watching the unlikely scene. Your family is healing, she says low, with satisfaction. Nathaniel pulls her closer. Our family. You, me, Thomas. Even my stubborn mother. All built not on old obligation, but on conscious choice and true love. Summer, 1823. 5 full years after the scandal that changed everything and nearly destroyed them all. Winmere is celebrating. Not a formal high society ball with hundreds, but something warmer and more real. A gathering of true friends, of family chosen by love. Arabella is there with her husband, Mr. Whitmore, and 2 small children running through the garden. The Marquis of Lynden, now frail with age and a cane, sits comfortably in a cushioned chair in the garden, watching his grandchildren play with a rare smile. Lady Henrietta, who now lives permanently at Winmere in her own chambers, helps Clara arrange the food table with traditional recipes. The 2 women have developed a deep mutual respect over the years, an unlikely friendship based on shared love for Nathaniel and Thomas, and now for little Elizabeth, born last year. A few local neighbors have come too, people who judge the Ashbournes not by an old, forgotten scandal, but by who they are now as generous neighbors. Nathaniel is in the center of the flowering garden, 5-year-old Thomas and Arabella's children running around him in an impromptu game of tag. His laugh is free and light, without the heavy shadows he carried when he returned from the war 7 years ago. He catches Thomas and spins him in the air, the boy shrieking with pure joy. Clara watches from the stone veranda, one hand on her belly, pregnant again for the 3rd time. Another boy, they hope with anticipation. Arabella joins her, following her gaze. You are happy, she states, not asks. Clara smiles with deep contentment. More than I ever imagined possible when we were young. And you? Arabella nods vigorously, completely happy. It is funny how everything worked out in unexpected ways. That terrible scandal we thought would ruin us all forever actually freed us all from invisible prisons. I found someone who truly loves me for who I am. You and Nathaniel finally got together despite everything. Even Papa softened with the years and accepted it. Clara laughs softly. Society still gossips sometimes when we go to London. Lady Ashbourne and her old romantic scandal. But I do not care anymore, not one bit. I stopped trying to be what others expected and started being who I truly am underneath. Arabella squeezes her hand with affection. It was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do in my life. The sun begins to set gloriously, casting golden light over Winmere and everyone gathered there. Nathaniel looks up and finds Clara watching him from the veranda. Even across the distance of meters, their gaze connects deeply. 6 years of painful separation, 2 years of devastating scandal, 5 years of building a true life together. And now, finally, permanently, irrevocably together. He leaves the children with a kiss on their hair and goes to her, taking the stone steps 2 at a time. He places his hands gently on her growing belly, feeling the baby kick strongly. "Our son will be raised here," he says low, with emotion, "in a home built on true love, not on society's cruel expectations. He will never know the prisons that almost destroyed us." Clara covers his hands with hers. "We will teach him that choosing genuine happiness is not frivolous selfishness. It is true courage." Nathaniel kisses her hair tenderly. "And we will teach him about you, about how you were braver than any soldier I ever knew in war, how you defied everything to choose love." The party continues around them as the sun sets completely in shades of pink and gold. Candles begin to be lit. Music starts, not a formal high society quartet, but a local fiddler playing cheerful melodies and country dances. People dance on the soft grass, without suffocating formality, without cruel judgment. Thomas runs to his parents, asking them to dance with him and his little sister. Nathaniel picks up Elizabeth in his arms. Clara takes Thomas's hand. The 4 of them dance together under the stars that are beginning to appear brightly, surrounded by true family and real friends who love them. It is not the life that society would have chosen for them according to old rules. It is not the story that was planned 7 years ago when they were young and followed scripts written by others. It is infinitely better. It is real. It is theirs. And in the Winmere garden, where wild roses grow freely without cultivation and love was finally chosen over empty duty, the true story of Lord and Lady Ashburn continues. Not a sugary fairy tale, because those rarely include scandal and pain and impossible choices, but a story of true love, which, yes, sometimes needs to be fought for and chosen and defended against everything. A story that proves that sometimes the bravest choice is the simplest one. To choose love above all else. To choose true happiness. To choose the person who makes your heart beat faster, even when the entire world says it should not. And to live, finally and completely, with the happy consequences of that courageous choice.